everyone, to the Central Church podcast. I'm Brooke, and here with me I have Chris Dodge and Brian Doherty. Both of these guys are awesome servants and leaders within our church, and we're really excited to hear their perspective today. So first, why don't both of you just introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about who you are?
Yeah, I'll start us off. My name is Chris Dodge, and I grew up in Maine, and for most of my childhood until I moved down to Florida for a little bit, where I met my wonderful and amazing wife, which I'm super thankful for. And then God called us back, which is another absolutely crazy story for a different time. But then we served here for a little bit. We found Central, been here for three and a half years, maybe somewhere around there. Absolutely loving it. Absolutely loving the fact that God is moving. He's doing things in that time period between and during finding Central. We have two of our lovely, beautiful girls. And so anyways, yeah, that was basically about me. And a fun fact about me, actually, I'll say, is that I really actually like to listen to a lot of podcasts. So I would like to thank you, Brooke, for inviting me here because you're making a dream I didn't know a dream come true, because I'm actually on a podcast. So this is kind of fun.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad to have you. And what about you, Brian? Tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, so a little bit about me. My name is Brian Doherty, as Brooke said. I'm happily married. I have a son. His name is Luke. And I grew up in Massachusetts. I grew up following a different religion, so did my wife. And when we found out we were pregnant, we really found the calling back to Christ. And that's when we found Central. And we've been coming to Central for a little over 2.5 years now. And it's been absolutely amazing. It's been refreshing. I usually refer to it as my glass of water, and that's why I think I serve so much, is because I don't ever want my glass of water to get empty. So basically what I do with the church is I'm one of the leaders on the response team. Shameless plug, if you ever want to look into joining the response team, please put an application on the Central page. You'll definitely find out more about me as I talk throughout the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thank you for joining us. And you both do so much, not just at Central, but just for the community. And so thank you. But today we are going to start a new series actually on the podcast tied to our current message series at Central called Finally Some Good News. And this message series is all about breaking down what the gospel is, or rather the good news. And it is our hope that we would all gain a better understanding of the best news that we could ever receive, and just feel confident in our ability to relay this to the people around us. And during this series, we will talk about 4 different topics: God, man, Christ, response. So it's just kind of an easy breakdown of the gospel. And in order to fully explain the good news, the gospel message, a person has to have a basic understanding, at least, of who God is. Nothing else makes sense unless you get who God is and what that means for us. So today, that's where we want to start. And obviously there's so much that we could talk about with regards to God's many worthy attributes and his characteristics. But we think, in order to start to understand the gospel, there's two things in particular about who God is that you have to understand. One is that God is the creator, and 2, God is holy and righteous. So everything that ever was starts from knowing that God is the creator. We see in Genesis 1 that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And this is the starting point of the gospel. This is the starting point of everything. And even the heavens and the earth display God's power. And God is so powerful that even creation itself speaks into the glory and power of him. It says in Romans 1:20, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been, so that people are without excuse." And so this is kind of where we want to focus on for a little bit. Um, I love in Greg Gilbert's book, What is the Gospel? He writes, "There is something about the grandeur of creation that calls out to the human heart, saying, 'You are not all there is.'" And I just love this, and it kind of speaks into the power of God being creator. So, Brian, have you seen this in your own life? Just examples of God's power and grandeur through creation itself?
Yeah, Brooke. So I've been blessed multiple times to have traveled and to see the world. I've been to the Green Hills of Ireland. I've been to the Grand Canyon in Nevada. I've seen a gorgeous sunset on the beach. I have seen multitudes of nature. And however, for me, creation was never more exemplified for me when I became a father. For me and my wife, it was a long process. It took about 3 years. It took a long time. We had to go through multiple surgeries and multiple interactions, and it really started bringing us closer to God and helping us pray more and more to trust in God, because we wanted to see that miracle, that moment of pure joy and elation. And after 2.5 years of negative pregnancy tests and troubles and tribulations, and starting to kind of back away from the Creator, Thanksgiving morning happened, and my wife said, "I think I'm pregnant. I think I'm pregnant." And I said, "No, no, we're not doing this. We're not going through this." I didn't want to have to pick her up on Thanksgiving morning. I didn't want to have to talk her that it's going to be okay. Like we'll be okay. And I think both of us at that point had started to get frustrated, started to throw our hands in the air and say, "You know what? I can't do this. I don't know what to do. Lord, guide me, strengthen me, help me, please." And on that morning, talk about a morning that you're going to be thankful for the rest of your life, we found out we were pregnant with my son, Luke. When you find out you're becoming a father in any aspect, whether it be a father of a child, a father of a foster child, a father of a dog, a father of an animal, it doesn't matter. You realize that there is more love for than just yourself. And that creature, that being, is your heart on your sleeve. And the Bible is very clear to us. It tells us that God is all loving. He loves harder and better than we ever could imagine. And if you are a father to anything, you can't imagine how you could possibly love something more than you already do. I can't imagine the love, the grace, and the joy that my God has for us. I'm blessed to be called one of his disciples.
That's awesome. Yeah. I think that's, a really a good and interesting aspect to take that idea of God being creator from a parenting perspective, because of course, whenever you create something, Luke is partially your creation, and you see what just a small glimpse of, the love that God has for us as His creation, and knowing that you want what's best for your son, and obviously God, who is so powerful and a creator, wants what's best for His creation, us. And I think that's a really good aspect to take that. And if we believe that everything is created, this means that everything has purpose. Everything from what we do to our little newborn baby. Everything has purpose. Everyone has a purpose. And we, as His created beings, have a specific purpose in mind. Genesis 1:26 through 27, it says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God, He created them. Male and female, He created them." this speaks into that God created us and gave us a purpose. And because of this, we belong to him. So Chris, could you just speak into what our purpose is as God created beings?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think that this is so cool, the timing of this, because God's been really drilling into my head a lot of things about Genesis, a lot of things about creation, a lot of things about identity and everything. It's just fantastic to see, everything has a purpose. There's a reason why I'm here to even say this, because there's a purpose in that.
Mhm.
Because God's good, and that's amazing. Yeah, I was looking at the account in Genesis as he's creating everything, and how like it's just I would love to see it. I would love to have actually been there and seen that, but like how everything just started forming and moving and shifting, and every time he looked at it, he said, "It's good. This is good. This is good." Every day he kept going through that, and even like the stars. I don't know about you guys, but like looking up the stars is one of the most fantastic things. I absolutely love it. And it's this little tiny section in Genesis that like he's like, oh yeah, he did all these things and all this stuff with the earth and the sun and the moon. Oh, and he made the stars. Like it was like a little afterthought that he threw in there. And but you look at it and you're like, oh my word, this is incredible. Like it makes you feel so small. Just looking at how profound space really even is too. And how it all has a purpose. If he positioned us slightly closer to the sun, we'd all burn and die. Slightly away, we'd all freeze to death. The position of the moon, the tilt of the earth, the way that everything was made perfectly to sustain life and to give us life. And this was all things that he said were good. And then until he got to Adam and Eve, and we see his characteristic in as he's talking, even saying, let's make man in our own image. He's talking to the three parts of the Godhead right there, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It's who he is right there in that moment. And so when he created Adam and Eve, he put his characteristics, his likeness, his image on them, on us as people. And it doesn't just mean that he's this big, burly, masculine, bearded dude that you would expect God to be necessarily, because he put also his identity on women as well. And so there's loving, nurturing, caring qualities of God that aren't men's strong suit. And then the big, powerful, types of things that you see in masculinity. And so those two coming together, it tells a story. It tells a story of who he really is. And then when he did that, he said, this is very good. It was a shift in everything. So everything that we look at in nature and all the beauty of it and how everything forms perfectly together, it still doesn't even compare to what God started in the garden when he said, this is the start of my love story. It's very good. And there's a huge responsibility when it comes from that. There's a huge responsibility of throwing on God's image on us and saying, all right, make it look good, guys, and send them out. It's an impossible task. And he knew it was an impossible task. And so he knew it right there in the garden. The gospel is all presented right there in the early accounts of Genesis, from the fall of man to how he's providing a way and everything about it. And so he knows that we're going to screw it up. He knows that that's what we are. But he sends his son to die for us so that we can accept that, have salvation, we can have a righteousness, we can be clothed in righteousness, not because of ourselves, because we're not going to do that. It's not going to happen, but because of his righteousness. And it even says in the word that we're righteous because of his righteousness. It's the only reason. And that's also a beautiful love story that he's given us too. And so I just want to tell anyone listening to this who might not fully understand this quality that he's given us, the characteristics he's given us, if we fail to see ourselves as the image of God, if the image bearers of God, which is easy to do, Don't get me wrong, it's very easy to do. When we screw up, when we mess up, when we have those issues, that is going to be now, we'll inadvertently put that on our identity of who we are. We're like, well, I'm just a screw up. This is what I do. And it can corrode us and destroy us. But to go back to the simple truth that happened in the garden, that he made us in his own image, and he saw that it was very good at that point. And if we don't see ourselves that way, we need to ask God to heal our eyes to see ourselves that way, because that is life-giving. That's truth. That's exactly who he says we are. And if we're not following that and we're not living in that, it can be corrosive. It can be detrimental to ourselves. And so to be an image bearer is to really grasp and hold that understanding of who God really is and how he made us and said it's very good, because he loves us. He fiercely loves us.
Yeah, well said. I think, I couldn't have put it better myself of, we are image bearers of God. And that is very good. I love that contrast between, the rest of his creation and him saying it is good, to us, him creating us and him saying it is very good. And so with that love and special relationship, we also have a responsibility, like you said, and that's to know him and reflect who he is. But in that responsibility, there's also a lot of joy, that we get to do that. Which is just awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That I love that perspective. But like you said, this can be really hard. It can be very hard to take, because the world tells us something very different. The world doesn't love the fact that we say we belong to him, that we because he created us, we serve him. And that goes against what our society says, by and large. But we know that he is good and he is righteous, and because of that, he knows what is best for his beloved creation. He knows what's best for us. But again, it's hard. And so, Brian, why might it be difficult for us to accept that, we are created beings, and because of this, we don't know what's best, but instead God does?
Yeah, bro. I think it's mostly because it leaves us vulnerable. It leaves us there, kind of hoping that somebody does love us, that does care for us, that does want what's best for us, and it involves fully trusting, and that's incredibly hard. I mean, we're taught as humans, no, you don't trust. You can trust a handful of people, but not everybody. But this person, but not that person. And I'm just so grateful that I wasn't a modern day Zacharias when my wife found out she was pregnant, because I doubted it. I did not believe it. And I'm glad I was able to speak the entire time she was pregnant. And because that's honestly where Luke gets his namesake, from Luke 1. And Zacharias doubts the angel who comes to him and says, hey, your wife's going to bear a child. And he says, how am I going to know that? And that's when the angel said, well, I told you, but now you're just going to have to wait and see, but you're not going to be able to speak until then. But in reality, it involves fully trusting. And for me to say that I've always been fully trusting, fully loving of God, it would be a strong misleading example. You need to find your God, find Christ, find the love he has for you, the glory, the grace that is there. I understand it's hard, because with that comes the atonement aspect. It comes the aspect of, well, there's also somebody there who's going to judge us on our wrongdoings. But no, with that hand of judgment comes a much higher and greater hand of love and grace. I could probably go on and on with this one, but I think I'm gonna pass it back to you.
Yeah, I think you are so right when you say that it's kind of a trust issue. which is hard because that involves, like you said, vulnerability. And that is just, one of the scariest things for us as humans, is to give up control and to make ourselves vulnerable. But really, that's where a lot of our growth can come from, and all of these different trials that we go through where we have to, like what you said when you were so open with us and shared part of your family's story, you couldn't do it on your own, and you had to trust in God, and He brought you out of it. And the next time that something comes around, and there will be a next time, when something comes up and it's hard to trust, and you feel like it's really difficult to believe that God, as creator, knows what's best for us and has a plan. You'll remember that last time that you trusted in Him, and it's kind of like that muscle memory is increased. It gets a little easier the more that we do it, and so we have to do it. And so thank you for just being so open with us, and sharing part of your story. I think that's really, really great, and I want more people to do that, so thank you for that. But I think after acknowledging the fact that God is creator, we have to understand, both of you have already talked about it a little bit, but we have to understand that God is also holy and righteous, in order to paint the full story of the gospel. We often view God as fully compassionate and loving, which is fully true. He is, but He's also not going to leave the guilty unpunished, because He's righteous. Exodus 34, 6-7 says, "And God passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord is compassionate, gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin. Yet He does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation." So this passage is interesting, in that it starts off by describing Him as fully loving and forgiving, but also He can't overlook sin, which kind of paints this interesting discrepancy, which Chris, you already talked about a little bit, is resolved through Jesus Christ, which we'll talk about more in the weeks to come. But it's important to, before moving forward in the gospel story, to understand that though God is love, His great love for us, for His creation, does not displace His justice and righteousness. Psalm 89:14 says, "Righteousness and justice are the foundation of your throne. Love and faithfulness go before you." So it's both, God's holy and right reign over creation can only remain right and good if He always remains perfectly righteous and just. So it's kind of this interesting picture, kind of like what you were talking about, Chris, that God is both. He's that nurturing and loving aspect, but He's also strong and powerful, and He has to remain righteous. So could you just kind of speak into why God has to be both, why He has to be both loving but also fully just?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird balance between the two. It's hard to grasp and really fully understand. But I remember one time I was doing a prison ministry in Florida. It was a juvenile detention center, and I was sitting down with this one kid, and I was talking, and he was saying, like, how do you believe in God and everything like that, when he has all these rules and he has all these things that he tries to put on you and everything. And I sat there for a second, and then I had a brilliant answer, which was definitely not me, because I could not have come up with this answer. That's why I love to tell this story, because this is something that God was speaking through me. But I said, they're not rules, they're guidelines. I said, because if you go out of those guidelines, it's going to hurt you tremendously. going to make you end up in places you don't want to be. It's going to hurt you and destroy you. It's going to lead to death. And the irony is, I'm talking to a kid who was in prison because of those same things. And so I know he could grasp and fully understand that, to say it really hurts. It really hurts to be in that position. And if we're going to see how he's perfectly just and we're going to see how he's perfectly loving, we have to understand that sin is disgusting. Sin is death. Sin will hurt us. Sin will ruin us. It will just completely make us not who we were before. It will corrode us. It will destroy us. And he knows that. He knows that very well. And so, as fierce and as powerful as he is, he will turn that seemingly against us, but actually for love, for us. You see in John was talking about the vine and talking about pruning and all of that stuff. It says that every branch that produces fruit will be pruned. And I never saw that until more recently. I just thought, oh, it's a pruning process, whatever. And he goes, no, it's actually a good thing to be pruned, because that means you are bearing fruit, which is Christianese for saying you're doing a good job. But the things are going well. And so he's going to take that, he's going to prune it. And when you're cut to a nub and you don't know what to do, and everything turns upside down and you don't understand, okay, well, this was going good. Why is this cut from me? Why is this taken away? It's, Brian, just like you said, that trusting process that has to take place during that moment. And that's the difficult thing, because that's seeing what justice really looks like. That's seeing how he loves us so much that he's willing to cut things out to protect us, to love us. And conviction usually will look just like, again, like the story in the garden when they sinned and they ate that fruit. He was looking for Adam and Eve and they were hiding, which is a humorous and ridiculous concept, but we do that all the time. All the time. And so you want to be like, oh, I'm hiding behind this tree. And it's kind of funny, but it's not so funny when it's your life. It's not so funny when it happens. And I've been there. And so when he asks, where are you? It's a simple question. And that's usually how conviction looks. Like, where's your heart? Where are you at? I want to know these things because I'm trying to help you. Trying to help you see these signs, because they're things in front of you that I know can be detrimental. Veer from them, cut them out. Take that responsibility of those things and destroy those things. And you know what? I'm going to, because I love you. And that's what he does. That's what he does. And it's such that I heard this recently. I just think it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It's never God versus the sinning man. It's God and man versus the sin. He wants to come alongside you. He wants to help you. He wants to care for you. He wants to love you. That fierce anger that we see and things in the Old Testament that you look at, like the vengeful, spiteful God and the things like that's almost hard to look at and see. That same fierce anger can be flipped to actually be showing fierce, powerful love for us, because he's trying to rip those things from us because he loves us that much. He knows that it's going to hurt his children. It's going to hurt the relationship with him. And ultimately, that's what's best for us, is to be in right standing with him and to be exactly where he wants us to be. And he'll make that happen. He'll help us with that. As painful and as confusing as it seems when it happens, he loves us. He absolutely does.
Yeah. Well said. It's out of his love for us that he has to remain righteous, because he loves us. And I love what you said about it's man and God versus sin. He's with us, and it might be difficult, but he's there. And I think that leads perfectly, into what we'll be talking about next week, which is man and our response in sin. But I just want to read this one last quote from Greg Gilbert again, from his same book, What is the Gospel? And he says, nobody wants a God who declines to deal with evil. They just want a God who declines to deal with their evil. And I think that is very telling, of where we're at. We don't want a God who doesn't love the world enough to deal with the evil, but part of that is dealing with our evil, our sin, out of his love for us. So just thank you guys both so much. I think you both had so many awesome things to share, and we just encourage everyone listening right now to explore these thoughts of this truth of God being creator and God also being righteous and just out of his love for us, his creation. So thank you both again for joining us. And before we wrap up, finally, I'd love to just close us in prayer. Father, we just thank you for who you are. Thank you for creating this world. Thank you for creating us and giving us a special relationship with you that no other creation of yours has. And that is special and unique. And I pray that people listening would see that we can be image bearers of you. That's who you created us to be. Help us just get to that point where we want to know who you are more and more, and that we want to reflect who you are more and more. I thank you that on this day we remember also more of your creation who served their country and who didn't make it back home, and we just thank you for them. And I pray that whether it was past or recently, that people would just know that you knew them, you know them, and you are knowing their families right now through the pain. And we just thank you for providing for us in every way, including people who are willing to sacrifice their lives to protect us. We just thank you again, God. We can't thank you enough for who you are and for creating the world that you did. And it's just in your holy name we pray. Amen. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we hope that you tune in next week for another episode.